Hi, this is Yvonne Galusha, and this is a video that's going to talk about decision making in VBA code. So we've already discussed mostly sequential processing, and that is when you go from one line of code to the next to the next. And then we've introduced repetition, which is with a loop structure, a for loop. And that's still really sequential, but you are doing something over and over. But what happens if upon certain conditions you want to do one thing and upon other conditions you want to do another thing? That's what I mean by decision making, and that's when you need to use an if-else type construct. So I have here example code for an if-else statement. I went ahead and used the nested loop structure that we talked about in our last video, and you may recall that we're basically identifying the amount of data in a region, and then we're processing down, and then we're going over to the next column, processing down, etc. with these nested for loops. So here's the if-else. Starts with if, then you have a condition. We're just saying for a cell that has a value less than 30, then, see, that's the next part of an if-else, then we want to change the color to yellow. So if we run this, it should go ahead and change some of the interior colors to yellow, which it did. Now, I'm going to just flip this off really quick, and I want to talk about else. So the logic here is very simple. We just are saying that if it's basically not less than 30, then go ahead and make it green instead of yellow, the cell interior background. Notice also that I changed this from a one-line, single-line if and used a multi-line if. This is more common just because it gets hard to read when they just extend off over to the right. I could have added an else and continued it as a one line. Again, I did it because this is typically what you would do, and you would be for readability, the indentation, etc. Once you go to multi-line, you have to add an end if clause. So let's go ahead and run this. It should set every color in the range to, or the interior to some color, which it didn't quite do. So obviously I need to check my logic here. I missed the top range. So I fixed that since I forgot before I was using this loop structure and I had headers, and now I do not have headers. So if we run this again, that is working correctly. So the next thing I want to talk about is, what if you have many conditions, multiple conditions that you want to apply in order to determine a certain course of action? Well, one thing you can do is build compound if condition statements. You do that with and or. So in this case, I extended it and said, what if the values are less than 30 or they're greater than 80, then make the color yellow, otherwise make it green. That's basically what the else says, is otherwise. So we should get a few more yellow with this change, which it looks like we did. The thing you have to be careful about is, a lot of times you would think, well, I want the cells that are values less than 30 and I want the cells that are greater than 80. So then you type an and here. But that's a mistake in logic, because basically that's saying this has to be true and this has to be true. And you will never get the values, since there's only one number in the cell, to be less than 30 and at the same time greater than 80. So this should end up with everything being green, which it did. So you need to be careful when you do logic with using these compound conditions, especially when you start nesting them. So nesting is another alternative, and sometimes people will do if, then else if, then else if. That's a slightly different construct. Let me show you that next. So here you see that I'm basically have a series of conditional checks. I'm saying if the value is less than 10, we'll make the cell yellow. If it's less than 20, green. Less than 30. Oops, I meant less than. Let's change that to less than. 30, then blue. Otherwise, make it red. So notice the spacing. I think this helps in readability. You normally will see the else ifs all lined up, so they're not indenting, but I kind of group these and then have a space. I think that helps. And I did not put the result assignment on the same line as the else because I think it makes it more clear in my mind that this is also an assignment statement, not when it's on the same place as the else and another conditional check. Let's go ahead and run this. And we see that every cell got assigned a color and all of this looks to be working. So I hope this has been helpful in introducing a way to do conditional checks or decision making in your VBA code.